Hey YouTube, this is Ian from Big Rock Moto. So I've changed my channel name once again, and now we are going to be Big Rock Moto, and I promise we're going to stay this way, we're not going to change. I used to be Big Rock ADV, and then I tried Big Rock Outdoors, but what I find is that most of you are here for the motorcycle content, so that's what we're going to focus on. We're not going to do any other videos. So everything from now on is going to be motorcycle focused. So if you haven't already subscribed, please do so. Okay, so many of you are asking questions out there about should you buy a KTM 790 Adventure R, or should you wait, or should you get the Yamaha Tenere 700? That is an excellent question, and I think is one that a lot of us are dealing with right now. This mid-size adventure market is going crazy right now. It's hugely popular, and for really good reason. The reason being that these bikes strike the perfect balance between having some on-road ability, but also not being too big and heavy and complicated off-road. I've been going through the same exact decision process myself, so what I'm going to do today is give you a buyer's guide to these two bikes. So stay tuned because I think you're really going to like this. So the KTM is priced at $13,700 and the Yamaha is just under $10,000. So $3,700 price difference. What do you get for the difference in price? So let's look at the specs of these bikes compared. So I'm going to break down the things that you should be looking at and that you should care about. So the first thing to look at is the weight. So we're going to look at the wet weight. That means both of these bikes full of fuel. Now please know that the KTM holds about a gallon more fuel than the Yamaha. So you kind of have to adjust with that in mind. So the KTM is right around 470 pounds full of fuel and the Yamaha is right around 450 pounds full of fuel. Now a gallon of gas weighs about 6 pounds, so if you added a gallon of gas to the Yamaha to bring it up to what the KTM has, it'd be 456 versus 470. So really a 15-pound difference in weight is not that much, so we can almost kind of call this category a draw. But wait, there's kind of a caveat because these bikes don't feel the same weight because of the way the fuel is carried low on the KTM, but we're going to get to that later. Let's talk about power. The KTM produces 95 horsepower, or 70 kilowatts. The Yamaha is down there at 73 horsepower or 54 kilowatts. Torque on the KTM comes in at 65 pounds or 88 newton meters, and torque on the Yamaha quite a bit less, as you would expect, at 50 pounds or 68 newton meters. Having ridden both these bikes very recently, I can tell you that the KTM feels much faster. The motor on the KTM feels like it wants to go and charge right now. It's very alive, it's very in your face. The Yamaha is more laid back and sort of says, you know what, I'm going to take care of you. Here you go, here's your power. What I do like better about the Yamaha engine is it has better feel really down low in the RPM range. So if you're chugging along in too high of a gear, it feels a little better than a KTM. Although I did test this in my KTM 790 review because I was concerned about the low RPM performance. So I put it in like third gear at way too low of a speed and just cracked the throttle all the way open, and the bike was perfectly fine. But I need to get more time on the 790 in low speed situations to see how that feels. But overall, I think the Yamaha feels better at low RPM, but what the Yamaha lacks is the top end horsepower. When you're out on the street and you really want to rip around, the KTM is so much fun. And I'm telling you, it feels way faster than an Africa Twin. It feels faster than an F800 GS. It feels faster. It feels a lot faster than the Tenere 700, that's for sure. And frankly, it almost feels as fast as my 1200 GS. Okay, let's talk about some of the other specs of the bike. So the ground clearance is different between the bikes. So the KTM has a lot of ground clearance, 10.4 inches or 265 millimeter. Yamaha's at 9.4 inches or 240 millimeters. So about an inch more there on the KTM. Suspension travel, also very important. KTM is leading this class of motorcycle with the suspension travel, 9.5 inches or 240 mil. And the Yamaha is 1.2 inches less, down there at 8.3 inches or 200 mils of travel. Now what's interesting is the seat height. So you would think that the Yamaha, because it has less suspension travel and because it has less ground clearance, you think the Yamaha would have a lower seat. Unfortunately, it doesn't. The seat height on both motorcycles is exactly the same at about 34.5 inches or about 880 millimeters. Now yes, you can get low seats, high seats, custom seats and all that, but we're just talking about if you buy the motorcycle off the dealer's floor, what's the seat height going to be? Okay, let's talk about some of the difference in features on these bikes. Now, as you would expect, for $3,500 more, or I should say $3,600 more, you get more on the KTM. But what exactly do you get? Well, here's exactly what you get. So the dashboard, the KTM has a color TFT display with a lot of cool functionality. The dashboard on the Yamaha is a LCD that looks kind of like a Game Boy. Now, I'm not trying to be rude about the Yamaha, but it does look pretty old-fashioned. Now, it works just fine, but it's a black and white LCD. So there you go. Cruise control. I love cruise control. I think once you've had it, you're never going to go back. That's just me. Now, on the KTM, it's a dealer-installed accessory. It's a few $100 to add it on. On the Yamaha, it's not available at all. Quick shifter. This is also something that is very important to me and that I absolutely love to have on a motorcycle. Unfortunately, you cannot get a quick shifter on the Yamaha, at least not through Yamaha, although maybe there'll be some aftermarket thing in the future. On the KTM, it's also a dealer-installed option, which you can throw on for a few $100. And if you buy one, I definitely think you should get the quick shifter and the cruise control. It makes all the difference on this bike. Let's talk about the ABS. So both bikes have ABS, but that's where the similarities end. So the Yamaha has a simple ABS on and off button. The problem with the Yamaha is that it does not have an off-road mode. So what I mean is that the Yamaha is either completely on or completely off. The other annoying thing about it is that when you shut the bike off, the whole thing resets back to on. So if you're off-road and you shut the bike off for whatever reason and you restart it, your ABS is back on. That's going to be extremely annoying for people. On the KTM, what you get is a configurable ABS system. So not only does the bike remember your ABS setting, now that is assuming that you're using the rally mode. You have to be using the rally mode for the bike to remember the setting when you turn it off and on. But assuming you're in the rally mode, you have the ABS to off-road, which means it allows ABS on the front wheel, but it turns ABS off to the back wheel so you can skid. It's great that it has that off-road ABS. And it does remember the setting, but only if you're in rally mode. The other thing about the ABS is that the KTM has something called an inertial measurement unit, or IMU computer. What it does is it's looking at the lean angle of the bike and it's sensing all these different parameters and adjusting the ABS for you when you're in corners and things like that, or different slippery conditions. The Yamaha doesn't have that kind of sophistication. It doesn't have those computers in it. Okay, riding modes. So the Yamaha, again, no riding modes. Just turn the bike on and go. And some of you are going to like that. I understand that, and that's fine. Now, the KTM does have 4 riding modes. The KTM has street mode, rain, off-road, and rally. And we'll have another video on what those all actually... Traction control. Now, this is a huge one for me personally. The Yamaha does not have any form of traction control at all. On the KTM, what you get is a 9-level selectable traction control system, and it's really, really effective. I say this from personal experience. If you don't believe me, go watch other videos on YouTube on the 790 reviews, and they'll talk about how effective it is. But when I played with it, what you get is a 1 through 9 level traction control. The reason this is really valuable, at least in my opinion, is that when you're in slippery conditions, you can dial in just how much control you want over the rear wheel. What this means in the real world is that, let's say you're in mud, snow, ice, rocks, gravel, whatever it is. You can set the bike to the right setting just for that situation and basically ride through a terrain and just leave the throttle all the way open, and the bike will figure out the traction and get you up that crappy hill or get you through that sticky situation without slipping out on you. Now, that's really valuable on an adventure bike, at least in my opinion, but again, your opinion may vary. And the great thing, of course, about the traction control in the KTM is that when you're in that rally mode, it pulls up the traction control level and you can change it right with your up and down arrows on your handlebar as you're riding. So the 790's been out for maybe a year now, and the 700 Tenere has been out for maybe a year, but only in some countries. Here in the US, we only just got the 700 Tenere just basically right now as I speak, and it's very hard to come by. But we've had the KTM for almost a year. And in that time, in the research I've done and from watching other videos, and I'm sure you guys have done your research too, some issues have come up with the KTM for the first 1 or 2 model years. One of the most notable things that I've noticed is the rear shocks have a pretty decent failure rate. Some people have theorized that the heat from the catalytic converter from the exhaust mid-pipe is coming up and making the shock too hot, combined with riding in hot conditions or lower speeds, maybe the shock's overheating and failing. So a lot of people have had shocks fail in the middle of their ride. They've had them overheat, leak oil, whatever it is. Now the bikes, for the most part, are still under warranty, so KTM's having to either rebuild it or replace it, but that's something to watch out for. Other things on the KTM that have come up, there have been some reported issues of clutch failures that are kind of premature. So I don't know if the clutch plates have enough material, but that's something to keep on. Some of the early bikes have had condensation in the TFT screen, so that's something to watch out for. Some things from riding the KTM that are just kind of annoying. So the KTM has really, really bad wind buffeting. Now, a lot of people have reported this. Personally, I found the buffeting to be just terrible, one of the worst that I've experienced. Of course, you can change windshields, you can move the windshield up and down. Of course, not while you're riding, you have to unbolt it. But the wind buffeting is a big factor. Because if you're going to travel on the bike, and if let's say you're coming from something that had pretty good wind management, like for me coming off of a GS and riding that 790, I felt like my head was in a blender. Now, I don't know if the 700 Tenere has similar levels of wind buffeting. I haven't really gotten it out on the freeway. There's some other annoying things about the KTMs that have come up in all the research. The fuel gauge is kind of wacky. It only reads when it's down to the half level, and even then it's not very accurate. That's probably to do with the way the fuel tank is down on the saddle kind of configuration. I've also heard that the Yamaha, though, has kind of a wacky fuel gauge too, so who knows. In terms of known faults with the Yamaha, I don't have a lot of information on that yet. There have been some reports of the dash, the screen kind of wobbling around, but there might already be some sort of a brace or some sort of a fix for that. Beyond that, I haven't really heard anything yet. I mean, we kind of think that a Yamaha is going to be maybe a little bit more durable, a little bit less issues. Yamaha tends to take longer in their development and testing of a motorcycle than KTM does. KTM is known for sort of rushing a bike out to production. I'm not saying that as a bad thing. I mean, they try to get the product out to you as soon as they can, but there's a little niggling things the first couple years that can happen on a KTM, which you might not find as much of on a Japanese brand. Japanese brands tend to pride themselves more on durability and not having problems. So that's everything I could come up with in terms of the differences on these bikes. I think what it comes down to is that the KTM, you pay more and you're getting more. For me, the features like the cruise control, the quick shift, the rally mode, the traction control, all those sorts of things really make a difference. And I should also mention that the KTM has tubeless rims from the factory, and I don't think the Yamaha has that. The reason I like tubeless rims is that no more carrying tubes, dealing with tubes. You can just carry a plug kit and a compressor and you're good to go. I think that the Yamaha is going to appeal to a lot of people coming off of bikes like the KLR 650 or V-Stroms or other more basic Japanese bikes that really you haven't had a lot of choices. If you wanted a twin-cylinder midweight adventure bike, you had to go German or you had to go Austrian, you had to go something European, and now you've finally got that Japanese option, which is probably going to be really reliable. The Yamaha is going to appeal to people who like basic motorcycle. You don't want all that electronics crap. You don't need a fancy screen. You don't need cruise control and selectable traction control and all that stuff. And that's great. More power to you. If you don't like that stuff, then the Yamaha is the perfect bike for you. The other thing to keep in mind is that the Yamaha feels not nearly as fast as the KTM. The KTM is a legitimately quick motorcycle. One of the things that struck me the most about riding the KTM was how fast it actually felt on the street. I was kind of blown away by that. I really didn't expect that, to be honest. So why don't you let me know down in the comments, which one of these bikes are you going to go with? If you're looking at a middleweight category, which I think a lot of you are, which one do you think you're going to buy in the next couple years? So let me know down there in the comments section. I hope this is useful for you guys. I hope this informs your decision. Let me know what you think. In terms of what I'm going to buy for myself, well, you know what? You're going to have to stay tuned and subscribe to find out. So, but we have a lot more content for you in the future. So until then, ride safe. We'll see you out on the trail.